On the 4th of July, 1954, in a rain-soaked stadium in Bern, a small leather detail changed the history of the world's most popular sport. Hungary had not lost a single match in 4 years, 32 games unbeaten. They were, by near-universal agreement, the greatest football team on earth. Just weeks earlier, they had humiliated West Germany 8-3 in the group stage. Nobody gave the Germans any chance in the final. 8 minutes in, Hungary led 2-0. The match looked over before it had really begun. 60,000 people already sensed what was coming. Look closely at the boots on the German players' feet, and you'll find the real story, one that begins not on a football pitch, but underground. In the 1800s, before football had rules or leagues, working men across northern England played rough-kicking games on any flat ground they could find. Those men wore the only boot they owned, heavy, ankle-high leather, built exactly the same as what they wore into the factory and down into the mine. These boots were built for punishment, not agility, reinforced toe caps, iron-hard soles. They were designed to survive a 12-hour shift underground, not a 90-minute sprint. In 1863, the Football Association was founded in London and gave the game a single set of rules for the first time. Football was becoming a sport. But the boot hadn't changed. Men playing under the new rules were still lacing up the same heavy leather their fathers wore to the pit. Some players began visiting cobblers with a simple request: nail a strip of leather across the sole. A raised bar, something to bite into wet grass. These were the world's first football studs, not engineered, not designed, just improvised by working men who needed to stay on their feet. By 1891, the Football Association had written rules governing the boot's sole. Studs were now official, provided they had no sharp or projecting edges. The boots themselves stayed heavy. A single leather boot soaked in rain could weigh over a pound. 90 minutes in those felt like running in wet concrete. They were cut high above the ankle protection, yes, but restriction too. Players lacked the lateral freedom we now take completely for granted. Meanwhile, in a small Bavarian town called Herzogenaurach, 2 brothers were quietly building something that would eventually change everything. Adolf and Rudolf Dassler founded the Gebrüder Dassler Schuhfabrik in 1924 in their mother's laundry room. They made sports shoes by hand, 1 pair at a time. By 1936, they had their global moment. Jesse Owens wore their handcrafted sprint spikes at the Berlin Olympics and won 4 gold medals under Hitler's watch. The Second World War tore through Herzogenaurach. The factory was conscripted for military production. The brothers, already arguing bitterly, fell into a feud that would never heal. By 1948, the break was total. Rudolf crossed the river Orach and founded Puma. Adolf kept the original factory and renamed it Adidas. The split cut Herzogenaurach in half. People looked at your shoes before they shook your hand. Puma workers married Puma workers. The town stayed divided for decades. But Adi Dassler had one consuming obsession beyond the family war. He wanted to build the perfect football boot. He sketched designs constantly. He watched players train in the rain. Every stud of the era was fixed, nailed in permanently, impossible to change. Firm ground, soft ground, mud, rain, the boot was always the same. Adi's idea was deceptively simple: make the stud removable. A threaded socket in the sole, so a player could swap studs based on the conditions of the pitch. Football authorities were skeptical. Some thought changeable studs were dangerous or simply unnecessary. Adi kept refining his design through the early 1950s, convinced he was right. Then came the 1954 World Cup in Switzerland. Adi's chance to prove what his boots could do on the biggest stage the sport had ever known. Hungary arrived as the most feared team alive. Their captain Ferenc Puskás was widely considered the finest player in the world. Their style of play had never been seen before. When Hungary beat West Germany 8-3 in the group stage, German coach Sepp Herberger had deliberately fielded a weakened side. He was protecting his best players for the final. It worked. West Germany ground through the knockout rounds. They would face Hungary again, this time with the World Cup at stake. The 4th of July, 1954. The Wankdorf Stadium, Bern, 60,000 people in the rain, the whole world watching. It had rained for days. The pitch was saturated. The grass was slick. Those conditions would matter far more than anyone in the stadium yet understood. Puskás scored after 6 minutes. Zibber added a second 2 minutes later. 2-0. It looked like the group stage rout beginning all over again. Adi Dassler was in that stadium. He had supplied West Germany's squad with screw-in studs and brought spare sets with longer grip designed specifically for wet ground. At halftime, while Hungary celebrated, the West Germans were in the tunnel changing their studs, swapping to longer ones engineered for exactly this sodden, saturated pitch. Hungary's players were in fixed stud boots and had been losing their footing all half. On a soaked pitch, the grip difference was quietly becoming decisive. West Germany came out transformed. Morlock pulled one back. Rahn equalized. The German fans, silent for 45 minutes, began to believe something impossible was happening. In the 84th minute, Helmut Rahn collected the ball on the edge of the box, planted his foot on stable turf, and drove it into the net. 3-2, West Germany led. Hungary pressed desperately. Puskás thought he had equalized. The linesman's flag said otherwise. The referee blew. West Germany were world champions. The Germans called it the Wunder von Bern, the miracle of Bern. A nation still rebuilding from wartime ruin had beaten the greatest team on earth. Players and historians credit Adi's screw-in studs as a decisive factor in the victory. Whether they were the only factor is still debated, but the boot had its moment. Adidas boot orders flooded in from across Europe. The little Herzogenaurach factory couldn't keep up. The screw-in stud went from innovation to industry standard within a decade. Through the 1960s and 70s, makers began experimenting: synthetic leathers, nylon soles, lighter materials. The Victorian work boot's heavy character was stripped away, stitch by stitch. By the 1960s, the high ankle cut was gone. Players finally had the lateral freedom their predecessors never did. The boot was becoming something closer to a second skin. In the 1980s, Nike moved aggressively into football. The brand competition that followed drove boot technology faster than any single inventor working alone ever could. By the 90s, elite boots were being designed around individual superstars: Ronaldo, Zidane, Beckham. A boot was no longer just equipment. It was a statement of identity. The highest performance boots today weigh as little as around 150 grams. A Victorian miner's boot, soaked in rain, weighed 10 times as much. The global football boot market is today widely cited at around $6 billion a year. Superstar endorsement deals alone run into the hundreds of millions. Carbon fiber soles, knitted uppers that mold to your foot, GPS sensors in the insole. The boot on a Premier League pitch today shares almost nothing but a name with those miners' boots. And yet the core problem hasn't changed in more than 150 years. How do you keep a foot stable on a slippery surface while giving it freedom to run? Working men in northern England answered that question first, with leather and a cobbler's nail. Every stud that bites into turf today traces a line back to that crude improvised bar. Every time a player twists a stud into their sole before a match, a 10-second ritual so routine it barely registers, they are performing Adi Dassler's idea. A small man in a Bavarian town believed a boot could change a match. On the 4th of July, 1954, in the rain in Bern, it did. This is Origins. Subscribe and come back tomorrow. There's a new origin every single morning.